Hi, everybody. Great to be here. Thanks very much for the invitation. I've been asked to talk about the new resistance. Who is controlling the narrative, and can we take it back? Independent voices pushing back against cancel culture. I can think of 3 examples that have riveted the world, where the regime media, the official media, the media party, the media political industrial complex was over here with the regime, with the government. They had the script set and ready to go, but they were foiled by citizen journalists. Precisely that phrase you heard before. If you've got a cell phone with a camera on it, and I know you do, you can be a journalist. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be a great journalist. That's up to you. But you have in your hands the tools to be a journalist that even 15 years ago would have been impossible. The barrier to entry to journalism, especially video journalism, which is the most powerful kind, was out of reach for ordinary people. You know those big over-the-shoulder TV cameras? Those are more than $100,000. And even if you had the videotape, how would you get it out there before the age of the internet? Now, a Twitter account, an X account, you're doing it for free. Minutes. And so the 3 stories I want to talk about sort of briefly are the trucker convoy in Ottawa, the farmers' rebellion in the Netherlands, and what I saw just 6 days ago in the heart of central London when literally hundreds of thousands of people marched for free speech and against mass immigration in the largest peaceful rally in UK history. And each of those things were targeted by the regime. In each of those instances, the regime thought they were laying a trap. Let me give you an example. When the truckers started converging on Ottawa, they started in January 2022. It took some time to make their way to Ottawa. Things really got started in early February. You may not recall, but Justin Trudeau was licking his lips. You could see the script that was being written by the aforementioned media political industrial complex. This was Canada's January 6th moment. Now, January 6th moment in the United States was a bunch of baloney. My friend Gavin McInnes calls it the great meandering. People just sort of meandering through Congress. There was someone killed, but it was a protester. It was trumped up, it was pumped up, it was this proof that violence was on the right. And I'm not for breaking glass, by the way, and I'm not for trespass, by the way. Don't think I'm in support of those things. But this was turned into the crucial moment, our version of when JFK was shot. It was the most grave thing. And you know, the Democrats did indeed put people in solitary confinement for years. It was atrocious. And Justin Trudeau thought that's what was happening. I mean, think about it. The little people, the deplorables, they were gathering, they were on their way to Ottawa, and it was the exact same setup, wasn't it? Except a few things. First of all, Parliament was closed. The center block of Parliament was under renovations. You couldn't get in. The truckers stayed in their trucks. And instead of breaking things and smashing things, they had a festival. I remember when I drove in, I thought this is a feeling like a festival feeling, like a town that just won the Stanley Cup or something. I had never in my entire life seen people spontaneously wave the Canadian flag and spontaneously sing the anthem. Have you ever seen that? Just a couple of people walking down the street and they start singing the anthem. I have never seen that in my life. And it was so authentic and organic and so unled. It was so grassroots, so authentic, so organic, so bottom up, so disaggregated. In fact, any attempts to professionalize or organize it were thwarted. You might recall that people set up a GoFundMe, which was shut down, and briefly, GoFundMe was going to repurpose those donations to left-wing causes like Black Lives Matter, if you can believe it. They refunded it, but then they set up on Give, Send, Go, a more independent-minded group, and I'm a super fan of Give, Send, Go, and I know They've got a booth in the back, and I only use Give, Send, Go now because I trust them that they will fight hard against censorship. By the way, that's a little plug for Give, Send, Go for you. But even that was frozen. There was no elected politician on the federal level. Remember, that was when Aaron O'Toole was the leader of the Conservatives, and he had a fatwa. He told his MPs they could not attend. They could not even meet the truckers. These were the ultimate grassroots, and really truckers are independent-minded people anyways. They're often owner-operators, and they're slow to anger. But how crazy was it that truckers who had saved the day, how many times did politicians praise truckers during the lockdown? The people keeping us going, the people delivering our food, delivering our stuff that we were ordering from Amazon. Yay, truckers, until finally they came for the truckers, didn't they? They said that truckers, who I think are the most solitary profession other than maybe lighthouse keepers, truckers were ordered to get the jab or they couldn't work anymore. Well, the truckers came to save us, or as Orwell would have said, it was the proles. If there was any hope, it would be with the proles. There's some things so stupid that only a PhD can believe it, but the truckers had the common sense. But my point is this, Trudeau thought this is going to be awesome. And the regime media thought, oh my God, this is going to be terrifying. They literally would not come down from their offices to meet the truckers because they believed their own BS that the truckers were violent, that the truckers were the Proud Boys, as if the Proud Boys were ever more than a drinking club. They believed that it was dangerous. A few regime journalists did go down with bodyguards. I kid you not. And I tell you that they would have gotten away with it. They would have labeled the truckers a January 6th militia, domestic violent extremists. They would have gotten away with that if the only media out there would have been like it was 1995 instead of 2022. Because a little army of severely normal people, some of whom had never done anything journalistic before, simply took out their phones, pointed it, clicked record or clicked live stream, and the truth got out. And our little company, Rebel News, which was only 7 years old, but not even 7 years old at the time, we had youngsters out there on the street 23 days straight, no one taking a break, just live streaming what was going on. And you know, the CBC rate card, I haven't looked at it in a while, but it claims that they get 360 million views and impressions in the average month. That's quite a lot, isn't it? Well, for the month of February 2022, the month of the trucker convoy, Little Rebel News, with our reporters just holding up their little baby cell phones and streaming to the world, got 400 million views and impressions, more than the CBC does in an average month. How could that possibly be? And live streaming is just what it sounds like. We all know what it is now, just showing it. Now, this wasn't live streaming from a studio. This was just walking around the street. And the simple dispelling of the myths. Our journalists were soon doing interviews all around the world, from the United Kingdom, all across America, of course, Germany, France, Australia, India. The whole world wanted to know what was really going on. For the first time in my lifetime, again, people were genuinely interested in Canada around the world. When was the last time there was that much true interest in something Canadian? I don't think it ever happened before. Now, some regime counterparts of the CBC would ask the CBC what's going on, like the CNN never contacted Rebel News, but who cares? Hundreds of millions of people were getting the truth directly. That was the truckers, and I have to tell you, to this day, when I travel abroad, people still talk about the truckers. It inspired them, including the Dutch Farm Rebellion. And just the same way as Canada's government is obsessed with carbon, you're not going to believe this, the Dutch government was obsessed with another chemical on the periodic table of the elements, nitrogen. Just leave the elements alone. What, did you hate chemistry? Did something bad happen to you in chemistry class? You can't stop boron, carbon, oxygen. Now, you can't stop them. They are part of the world, but they have this same crazy get rid of nitrogen thing that we have get rid of carbon. I'm not making that up. I know it sounds insane to hear it. That's probably how some people think when we talk about getting rid of carbon. Anyways, that's code for shutting down farms, because nitrogen is one of the elements used in fertilizer. The Netherlands is one of the largest food exporting countries in the world. I had no idea. It was a war against farmers to seize land and to destroy them as a political force. They were inspired by the truckers. And again, the regime media, the official media, the government-funded media, of which there is a ton in Europe, they demonized the farmers. But the farmers had citizen journalists on their side, including some from Rebel News who went over there. And then the third part of this, and by the way, how did that story end? The Farmers' Party arose and elected an enormous number of politicians. And I put it to you, it was despite the media, not because of it. It was citizen journalists who told the truth that managed to galvanize the movement. Part 3 in this story, what I saw in London 6 days ago. You might have heard of my friend Tommy Robinson. And odds are, it sounds like some of you have. And if you were to rely on the BBC, that's the British equivalent of our state broadcaster, there's several state broadcasters. Remember when Jordan Peterson went on a channel and Kathy Newman had this car crash of an interview? So you mean to say, and she would totally twist his words. Do you remember that one? It was maybe the most classic Peterson interview of all time. That was on Channel 4, which is another public broadcaster. Half of the TV stations in the UK are owned by the government. How on earth could you possibly find true news about anything dissident when you're getting it from essentially a PR machine of the government? And Tommy Robinson, who's a friend of mine, is a skeptic, a dissident, a contrarian, a warning voice against mass immigration and the Islamification of the public square. He was obsessed with the rape gangs in the UK, predominantly Pakistani Muslim men who were predominantly targeting white working class women. Those are terrible words to hear. Believe me, they're terrible and dangerous words to say. It's just also a statistical fact. But you can imagine how troubling saying such things would be to a polite government, keep calm and carry on type government like the Brits are, stiff upper lip government. And so they prosecuted them. They banned him from Twitter, from Facebook. When they banned him from Facebook, he had more action, more engagement on Facebook than either the Prime Minister or the leader of the opposition, just some working class guy from Luton. And it almost seemed like it was over for Tommy Robinson until Elon Musk came in and flipped the switch back on. Elon Musk, and I tell you, sometimes history turns on one man or one woman making one decision. And I have to say, Elon Musk's decision to buy Twitter and stand athwart the hurricane and to bear it changed everything. It gave people their voices back. Tommy being one of the most acute cases, but you probably know someone who was shut off on Twitter and turned back on. And Elon Musk had a rule that if it was not considered criminal to say such a thing in another forum, Twitter wasn't going to be stricter than the law. And it was with that kind of citizen journalism, giving Tommy his voice back, that there was a rally in London last Saturday. And depending on who you believe, I've seen the lowest credible estimate I've seen is 150,000 people. And I saw credible estimates, if you saw the video of the crowds, of over 1 million. And again, not a single elected official attending, not a single legacy media company attending, but literally dozens of citizen journalism organizations where at the trucker convoy, it was Rebel and a handful of other journalists. At this enormous freedom of speech rally I was at in London, there was dozens. There was 20, 30 different independent citizen journalist groups. And so when the regime media spat about what they saw and derided and defamed, you know what? It didn't even matter. It didn't even matter. Last I checked, when Elon Musk retweeted the live stream of that event, it had 39 million views. Tommy Robinson's own feed had the same number. I believe that on Twitter alone, that rally had 1 billion impressions in one day. And even if you think 90% of that is overcounting, it's still the most, like that's the Super Bowl, that's the World Cup of rallies. I was contacted by the UK Observer with a bunch of trick questions, gotcha questions, because Rebel News had employed Tommy 7 years ago, and they were poking around. They wanted to know about that. And I just said, you've got the biggest news story in memory in your city, and you've got my attention. I'm Tommy's former employer, and I'm his friend, and you don't want to talk about the news? Even to be critical about it. Why don't you ask critical questions? Throw your toughest question about what is happening. But instead of informing your citizens, you want to exhume some rumors from 7 years ago? How pitiful is that? Not just that it's an attack or a hit job. I get it. That's what they do. But you're not even going to provide basic facts and information that have pulled hundreds of thousands of Brits, severely normal mums and dads who've never protested before. You don't think that is worth covering? Well, that's fine by me, because there are dozens of citizen journalists that'll fill the void. And if you're with the regime media and you can't understand why your ratings are falling and no one trusts you, think about that. You're talking about this incredible event, and you can love it or hate it. You can agree with it or disagree with it. But if instead your role as a mainstream media journalist is just to nitpick and to gossip about old rumors, even if you were onto something with which you're not, you are not telling the story about what is happening in your country, and it is falling to others to do so. In conclusion, my point is this. If you look at these three mass events where grassroots people stood up to the regime, the trucker convoy, the farmer rebellion in the Netherlands, and Tommy Robinson's massive rally in central London, the same theme is present in each of them, and it grew from one to the next. Citizen journalists, that means you. Now, I don't recommend it as a job. It's very difficult and it doesn't pay well, but I certainly recommend it as a hobby, at the very least, which is fine for you, because you don't have to do it full time. You're just at an event, pull out your phone, live stream, film, ask someone what's up. You really don't need a lot more equipment than you have in your pocket. And I put it to you that by simple curiosity, by asking the most basic question of people, why are you here? And just listening, you will do more journalism than most regime journalists in this country. I used to have a kind of inferiority complex about CBC and CTV and the Globe and Mail. I can tell you I no longer do. And it's not just because we have more viewership than them. It's because, simply put, they're not any better than any citizen journalist out there. My friends, never think you're second best as a citizen journalist. In fact, odds are you've got something smarter to say, you have more life experience, and have a more creative angle than the same boring talking heads on the CBC. Thanks, everybody. Keep fighting for freedom.